Did you ever wonder why the religious are just so dumb? Well, we're going to explore that a little bit today. They don't care about the actual truth, so long as they get their fee-fees stroked, and today, Jay Dyer is going to fall right into that trap, and in the end, freak out and run away. Because, of course he is. What the hell else can he do? Today, we're going to take a look at part of a podcast or something, I'm not really sure exactly what it is, between somebody named Josh and Jay Dyer. Honestly, if this is the best that Jay Dyer can do, he's even less impressive than I thought, and I didn't really have any respect for him before. This is a problem, but it's not just his. All apologists do things just like this, and I'd like to thank Toaster for finding this video because I think it teaches us some interesting lessons. So, can Jay keep from looking like a complete idiot? Yeah, I wouldn't be holding my breath if I was you. I don't think we found an apologist yet who has any rational credibility. So, let's get into it.
Okay, Jay, we got DE here. Go ahead, DE.
Hey, I was just wondering, do you think that God can do whatever he wants to do?
Alright, I'm going to break in here real quick. My channel, my rules. Now, if you were going to take the arbitrarily assigned characteristics of God seriously, then yes, by definition, God ought to be able to do anything, because that's what Christians have just made up in their heads. I've kind of talked about this before, but we'll go into a little bit more depth. If God was real in the first place, and there's no evidence for that, but if so, and if God was actually responsible for creating everything, then by definition, God could create everything any way he wanted because he's all-powerful. That's the way they define it, even though that's not defensible. However, more recently, they've had to scale God back because people started asking a lot of difficult and potentially uncomfortable questions, and now God can only do what is logically possible for God, which means he's actually relatively weak. Because I can only do what is logically possible for myself to do, so how is God any better than I am? This is where they really start to have problems, because they're clearly not talking about anything that's real. You can't just redefine real things at a whim. You have to actually study the real thing to see what it's like in the real world. The second that you point that out to the religious, though, they kind of freak out, especially if you start to ask any difficult questions along the way. But let's see how they respond, shall we?
No, I mean, that's going to be again determined by our system. So what God can do is determined by what the system determines God can do, and what determines what God can do is his own nature.
That kind of makes God a weakling, doesn't it? Again, how do you determine what God's nature actually is without a real existent God to objectively study? It very quickly devolves into, here's what God is like because we say so. Well, how the hell do you know that? You can no more decide on your own what God is like than you can decide what unicorns are like. What's your rational frame of reference? And of course, the religious will pull all kinds of crap along the way. Well, that's what my religion says. Okay, how does your religion know that? Well, that's what my holy book says. Cool. How do the people who wrote your holy book, how'd they know that? These are questions that don't go away unless we stop asking them. And we should never ever do that. Of course, the religious don't have any rational frame of reference, so they just make things up based on what other people have said in the past or what they really want to believe today. And that's not a way to actually evaluate the real world. None of this has anything at all to do with reality. It's all childish, immature fee-fees. Because I say so. But that doesn't get you anywhere intelligent, does it?
So no, God cannot do literally anything. So like, could God make
Well,
himself not exist or something like that? No.
Then God isn't all powerful, is he? You have to keep in mind that so much of the Christians' views on their imaginary friends are based on trying to keep it safe from rational inquiry. God used to walk with man until that got inconvenient. Then God just went away and became a voice in the clouds. Then something you imagine, and now it's just something that's wholly beyond any capacity for rational examination. They're just running around with the goalposts because they're terrified that somebody's going to find out that they're bullshitting you. How do they know any of this? Well, they can't say. It's because they desperately want to keep their deity safe, and that requires an endless string of just making stuff up when the water gets too hot to remain. They are terrified to think intellectually about their beliefs, and the second that you start to recognize that, you will see them pulling all kinds of shenanigans that just make you laugh.
Well, I just asked if he could do anything he wants. Well, that changes the question then. Can God want to not exist and then be unable to do it?
No, his willing is always in accord with his nature, so he can never will something against his nature.
Says who, and how do you know that? How do you know what his nature is? How have you tested that intellectually? How do you know that God didn't want to stop existing 5 seconds after the last claimed appearance in the Bible, and he just went and offed himself? Prove that's wrong. Of course, the religious can't, because this isn't about reality. This is about having a comforting fantasy in their heads. That's why we have to ask how they know these things. Not believe, not have faith, but know. Knowledge requires some rational basis in fact. And the simple fact is, they don't, and they don't care. It all comes down to tradition or apologetics or blind empty faith, and that doesn't get them anywhere at all. How did any of the people who came up with the traditions or the apologetics or the faith in the first place know any of it? Because as much as I'm loath to play along, can't we all just do the same thing? I have faith that God is dead. I don't, but let's pretend. So, prove me wrong. Of course, they can't see that you're just pointing out all of the logical places that they're going wrong, because they don't really care about any of that, do they? They just want to believe. It's like talking to a crazed Harry Potter fanatic about the sports team rankings at Hogwarts. You don't get anywhere realistic fast.
So it sounds like the answer has changed then to God can do whatever he wants, right?
No, again, that was what I was intending to critique at the beginning, was that you're importing a definition of what it means to do anything that's not possible in our system.
What system? What system do you demonstrably have? Here you are claiming knowledge that you have not shown that you actually have or could even possibly have. Where are you getting this information, and how have you tested it objectively to see if it stands up to any kind of critical scrutiny? Just because you want to flap your lips, that doesn't make you right. You have to do a whole lot better than that, and you people never, ever can.
So if God is the ultimate reference point and the ultimate authority in our system, then his nature is going to determine what he does and doesn't do. So he's good by nature, so he doesn't do bad things, and he can't will the evil. He can't will to not exist because he's existence itself.
And all of that is just an empty assertion on your part. I get that these assertions give you a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, but that doesn't actually mean anything. This is one of the many, many reasons why the whole idea of worldviews is so meaningless. It's just an assumption that you're right without ever showing your work. You want it to be true, so it's got to be true. You spend all of your time asserting that it's true without ever doing a thing to back any of it up. And that's all the religious know how to do. assume things, believe things, have faith in things. But that doesn't matter. We don't care what you assume. We care what you can demonstrate. How about you get to work?
Right. But all of those things fall under what God wants, right? So I'm asking,
Well,
can
no, God
God,
wants in accord with his nature. So no, he doesn't. There's no
right,
necessary connection between like he well, he can only will the good. I'll put it that way. So he can't will the evil. So no, he can't will to not exist because that would be against his nature.
right. So that's a case of God not being able to do something that he doesn't want to do, right? You
Yeah,
follow what I'm
but
saying?
what he
Like
wants to do is determined by his nature. So he can only will in accord with his nature, just like a human being can only will in accord with his nature.
And that is completely wrong. Given the right set of circumstances, I can do things that I'd never do otherwise. If you were to go after my family, trust me, I'm going to kill your ass in a heartbeat. We can look in the Bible and see the exact same thing. God, who this J guy says that God is all good, but he still mass murdered the vast majority of life on the planet in the flood, didn't he? He still ordered genocide. He gave the thumbs up to slavery. There are all kinds of things that the God of the Bible did that, at least in my estimation, are completely morally reprehensible and evil. But the religious don't see it that way, do they? Because they don't care. But we do have to ask the question, does that mean that God is not good? Or is it that Jay is just exercising a ludicrous amount of confirmation bias? Let me know in the comments what you think.
For example, I might will to bilocate, but it's not within my nature to do that. So I can't do it.
Can't do it, or physically impossible. Matthew 19:26. With God, all things are possible. Or is the Bible wrong? You tell me.
I don't know. Right. Well, all I'm asking is, you're different from God in that respect, right?
That's why I said
You
an
can want
analogy.
you can want to do things that you can't do, but I'm asking if you already told me can't want to do things that he can't do, right?
Correct. Not outside of his nature. So I'm saying that
Right.
the nature. What the point of the analogy was to show that natures limit what the beings can and can't do, and God's nature limits what he can and can't do.
Right. But it also limits what he can and can't want, right?
Correct.
And so for everything that God wants, that's something that God can do. Is that correct?
Honestly, this is just going around and around and around in circles, with the theist just making unsupported claims because that's what he wants to be true. That doesn't actually make it true, though, does it? It's why having these discussions gets you absolutely nowhere, because we, the skeptics, are after truth, and they, the religious, are after comfort. They don't care if their beliefs at all coincide with objective reality, so long as they get that dopamine shot in the noggin. Well, what's the point in that? You can believe all manner of ridiculous, absurd nonsense if that's all you care about. But that's still ridiculous, absurd nonsense. It just makes you dumb to believe it. And that's why you have to be willing to go beyond your feelings and actually give a damn what's actually correct in the real world. And the religious can never do that, can they? It's why you really have to hit them between the eyes. How the hell do you know that? Because they'll either have to lie to you, which is entirely possible, it happens all the time, or they'll have to appeal to blind faith, which, again, happens all the time, and it doesn't prove anything at all, but they can't actually come up with objectively verifiable evidence that they're factually correct. Because they don't care about that, do they? It's not going to change their minds when you point out that they're wrong, but at least you know who not to bother with in the future, because your time is a hell of a lot more valuable than to deal with the terminally delusional.
I'm sorry. So that my wife was saying something. Could you say that again?
Yeah. So for everything that God wants, that's something that God can do.
Correct. Yeah, they're in harmony. Yeah.
Right. So that's when you say yes to that, that's what I mean when I'm saying God can do anything that he wants to do. So the answer to that question
Yeah, as
is
long
yes.
as it's understood to be in with what's in accord with his nature, and so it's not in accord with his nature to want to not exist because he is existence itself.
Well, I don't know. Well, I don't understand that claim. But I'll just
Again, the very first thing I said to you was that the system is going to determine what it means to be all powerful or all, whatever. Any of the omnis. So you're just taking an extra systemic definition of what it must be and saying God doesn't do that.
No, that's actually backwards. An omni property, or any property for that matter, is exactly what it is. You don't get to change the definition just because the definition becomes inconvenient. All-powerful means all-powerful. Anything that isn't all-powerful doesn't get that omni property. You either are or you're not. You don't get to pick and choose. So you get the religious saying, well, my God is all-powerful, because they really like the sound of that. But then they have to walk it back because it can't be backed up in reality, and because a lot of people are asking a lot of really inconvenient questions about that. He's claiming to know God's nature and God's will with no evidence whatsoever and no means to back up how he actually knows it. He's just sitting there dictating what God can and can't do. Okay, how the hell does he know that? I've got no idea whatsoever. In fact, this is the whole basis for religion. Making shit up. Well, you don't just get to make shit up. Not if you want to maintain any credibility whatsoever. But the religious don't really care about that, do they?
And I'm just trying to tell you that that's what you're doing. That's the art. That's what I said at the beginning.
I don't know what you're talking about. I said there was something in there.
Come on, dude. Seriously, are you that slow? Like, I literally just told you at the beginning, like, what the system determines what the attributes mean. Do you understand that?
I don't know what it means.
Okay, exactly. So what it means for
don't.
God to desire and to want and to the omnis, the attributes, is going to be determined by our system. So you can't bring an extra systemic definition of those words and say, can't God do that? And if he can't, then he's not God. That's what you're doing.
That's all any of you are doing. All that is going on here is the theist saying, here's a thing that makes sense to me because I like it. And I don't care what the hell you like. I care what you can demonstrate is objectively true. At least try. Do something. Stop looking like a frickin' idiot. This is exactly why these discussions go absolutely nowhere, because it goes right in one ear and out the other without running into anything in between. It's why the theist runs away so often, because they get to a point where they're just spinning their wheels and nobody's taking them seriously. And the religious mind poison in their head keeps them from actually realizing what they're doing wrong. Religion has a built-in escape hatch. They will make excuses for why they have to exit stage right, because they get in over their heads and they can't admit that they're wrong. Let's see if that's about to happen, shall we?
No, I wasn't actually.
No, that is what you're doing. That's what you're doing. This is a low-tier classic atheist argument.
Well, I wasn't actually making an argument. I was asking a question.
Yeah, sure. Right. Here we go. They're not making arguments. It's just questions. And then it's a gotcha. Yeah.
And in fact, the first thing I tried to do was to get you to concede, which you did in fact concede,
let's move on.
That God can do that. God can do anything.
Yep, exactly as expected. He hung up and ran away. This is very, very, very typical, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about some stupid internet call-in show or the likes of Frank Turek or William Lane Craig. They have their pet answers and their pre-existing scripts, and if you stray from what they believe, they don't want to talk to you anymore. You become inconvenient to their narrative. They might have to think about things that fall outside of their faith, and they can't have that, can they? Plus, when you're trying to make a buck off of the backs of gullible religious dumbasses, well, you can't let them see the cracks in your armor, can you? So you gotta back away fast and try to change the subject. And that's what's happening a lot if you actually pay attention. Now, I'm not Josh, and I can only Monday morning quarterback here, but I wouldn't have done just what he did. There's nothing at all wrong with what he did, don't get me wrong there, but I would have gone deeper a hell of a lot faster, which probably means the call wouldn't have lasted as long. How do you know that? Where are you getting this crap, and how have you tested it so it's not just your fifis talking? Because that's really all that this is, and the sooner we disabuse the religious of that farcical notion, the better. I don't care if you're happy. I care if you're rational. I care if you can back up any of this garbage, and the sad fact is, none of them can. It's why they cut bait and run. How pathetic is that? Anyway, I'd like to thank Toaster for suggesting this video. It's always good to look at what my viewers come up with because I can't see everything. I can't be everywhere, nor would I want to. Trust me, there's a lot of stuff out there I'd have to scrub my eyes after I watched. If you happen to see anything out there that you'd like me to take a look at, please feel free, send it my way. You can leave it in the comments on any video or send it via email. The links, as always, are down in the description. Keep in mind that that's not a guarantee that I'll actually do it. I have more videos on the docket than I could ever conceivably get to, and more and more and more get added every day. Just know that I do appreciate your help and your suggestions, so I look at them all, I evaluate them all, and I try to do as many as I can. So anyway, until next time, don't let the religious get away with this stupidity. Call them out on it. It makes them look dumb, because they are. Not that they need any help in that, but that's really what they need. They need to be shown that they're wrong. Because eventually, it's going to get past the religious mind poison, and they'll have to start thinking about it. These people have problems. Maybe it's time we stopped coddling the religious children, and we forced them to grow the hell up.
Boom, dicky, 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 boom.